The very first thing you need to know about participation for your AS Politics exam is the different types of participating. The board wants you to categorise these forms of participation into electoral participation, which basically just means anything you do relating to an election, and non-electoral participation, which is how you engage in politics when there isn't an upcoming election. Electoral participation includes voting in elections, canvassing or leafleting, organising and fundraising, or working on campaigns. As for non-electoral participation, you have the choices of writing to an MP or other representative, becoming a member of a political party, joining a pressure group, blogging or publishing articles online, or direct action. Next, you need to be able to talk about whether political participation has increased or decreased, or whether there's any difference in between electoral participation and non-electoral participation. In the 1950s, general election turnout was 85%. Meanwhile, in 2001, it was only 60%. And as for political party membership, the percentage of voters in 2010 who were actually a member of one of the three main political parties was only 1%. To make this even clearer, you can mention that in 2010 the Conservatives had 130,000 members, but in 1945 they claimed to have 3 million members. Looking at these figures, you might conclude that political participation has indeed declined. But on the other hand, the number of people joining pressure groups has increased, and so has the number of people engaging in consumer boycotts. Next, you need to know all about compulsory voting. Compulsory voting is used in many countries, such as the civilized country of Australia, where, if you don't vote, you can be faced with a $20 fine and a court hearing. The advantages of compulsory voting include the following. People turn up to vote a lot more. In Australia, there hasn't been a lower turnout rate in 100 years than 90%. Compare that to the UK's 60% in 2001, and you can see that telling people you'll take their money away if they don't vote does work. Another argument for compulsory voting is that voting is such an important thing that it doesn't make sense that people should have the choice to not do it when they don't have the choice to not go to jury duty. In addition, because of the higher turnout rate, people sitting in the House of Commons will actually be the people who the country want there, rather than a small voting population who decides. In essence, this makes representatives better at representing, which is the whole point of even having a democracy. A side point to this is the fact that a near 100% voting turnout means that governments need to look after and try to please everyone in the country, not just the people who they know are going to vote, forcing them to stop ignoring demographics such as the young people who statistically don't vote as much. The government can also stop trying to convince people to go out and vote, and instead focus their efforts on explaining to people why what they want to do is much better than what everybody else wants to do. This encouragement of issue-based voting is thought to help both democracy and the efficiency of our government. Of course, you're still allowed to spoil your ballot, and so it's perfectly fine to say, I hate all of my choices because they're all corrupt bastards. The important part is, the government know how many people think they're all corrupt bastards, and in that way they can actually try and change themselves, so they can get out there and take your vote next time. However, arguments against compulsory voting include the following. Forcing people to vote or spoil their ballot can be seen as an infringement on your liberty. Some people think that we shouldn't be forced to do anything, even if it would help everyone else to do so. Another argument is that if we force people to vote, there will be a lot of what are called donkey votes, which is where people number their choices in the order that they're given them instead of by their actual preference. This is the sort of thing you see lazy students do in multiple choice questions at school. You also need to consider that if you start making people vote when they otherwise would not have wanted to vote, they probably won't even understand the voting process. So at least in the first 1 or 2 tries, they'll spoil their ballot just because they don't understand how to vote. Of course, it wouldn't be a difficult decision to make if there wasn't any money involved. And if you want to fine people, make them go to court, or inflict any other punishment upon them, you need to chase them up, spend time and spend money, which will probably be reflected in the taxpayer's dismay. Lastly, and this is probably the only strong argument, although don't say that in the exam, and it's, by forcing people to vote that otherwise would not have voted, you are encouraging people to go with the flow, as it were, and vote for the most popular candidate in their constituency. A lot of people will just vote so they don't lose money, and so they'll just vote for what their friend says or what their grandma voted, and this isn't actually democracy, this isn't representing what they want. So this therefore increases safe seats, so politicians and political parties will know that they have these seats that they're going to be able to rely on, but then they have these seats called marginal seats where they don't know whether or not they're going to win. So they'll change their policy so they can win their marginal seats. They won't need to cater for the safe seats, because even if people don't like them there, they're going to vote for them just out of tradition and what other people tell them to do. So politicians will just change their policies so they reflect what the marginal constituencies want. So there you have it. That's all you need to say about compulsory voting. Those are both the sides. You don't actually need to know which one's right, and luckily the exam won't ask you that, but they will ask you to bring up both arguments, so do that in the exam and you should be fine.